Alright guys, so the very first thing we're going to do is go up here to Window, and then we're going to go down here to Package Manager, and we're actually going to install the Unity's input system. So when this loads up here, just go up here where it says In Project and hit Unity Registry. Then up here in the search bar, type in Input, and then you will see Input System -1.0.1. Just hit Install. You're going to get a prompt shortly after that. It's going to be a little chat box. It'll ask you something. Just hit Yes. And then your Unity is going to restart, and then you will have the input system installed. So after that, right click and right down here, create a new input actions. And I'm going to call this player controls. Now let's check the generate C# class up here and then click apply. Alright, now we can actually start making our inputs. We're checking the generate C# class checkbox to make it into a script, and then we can reference that script in our future scripts. So let's double click on the player controls here, and it will open a window. Let's make an action map. This is basically just a section of controls on our controller. So for example, I'm going to make this one and call it player movement. And now in here in the actions, we're going to make all the inputs that handle movement. I'm just going to delete this default one here, and I'm going to click the plus icon on the actions, and I'm going to create a new action. I'm just going to call this movement because this will be the input that controls our player's movement. I'm going to change it to a pass-through, and then I'm going to change the control type to a vector2, which means it has the direction up and down or left and right. So on the binding here, I'm actually just going to delete this. Then I'm going to add a new one, and we're going to make it a 2D vector composite. Now think of this like a joystick or up and down, left and right, WASD keys. I'm just going to call it WASD, and then I'm going to make it analog. And I'm going to make the up key W, the down key S, the left key A, and the right key D respectively. And all this does, basically a 2D vector, means it's going to track input on the up and down axes and the left and right axes. So we're actually going to enable this for a joystick as well. I know some people will wonder how to do that. So we can just click up here on the plus icon again. And let's add a 2D vector composite again. And then all you want to do is call this, I'm going to call this left stick. And then we're going to change it to analog like before. And then up, we're going to say left stick up. Down is left stick down. It'll say gamepad. Right is left stick right, and etc. And all this is going to do is it's going to record when we hit the WASD keys, or we move the left stick up, down, left, or right. And based on that is going to give us a value, which we will then use on a script to, in the future, make our player do things like move, or sprint, or jump, etc. So let's exit and save it. And now let's right-click, and we're going to create a new script, and we're going to call this Input Manager. And this will manage every time we hit a button. So we have the buttons set up. Now we got to record what's actually happening when we press them. So let's erase the update and start method. I'm going to say player controls. And see, this is why we generate the C# class, because now we can reference it as a variable. So it's referencing all those inputs we just set up. I'm going to say on enable. So when the game object that this script is attached to is enabled, we're going to do some logic. And we're going to say if the player's controls variable is null, meaning it's not filled in, then we're going to basically say player controls equals new player controls. And all it's going to do is we're going to actually take that variable and make it a version of the player controls we just set up. That's all it means. So then we're going to have to enable some way to figure out when we're hitting up and down or WASD. So let's make a vector2 variable, and we're going to call this movement input. And remember, a vector2 is just used to store information on two axes. That's why it's called a vector2. So think up and down or left and right on the keyboard or left analog stick. Okay, so then we're going to say player controls dot player movement, referencing the action map, and then dot movement, referencing the action itself, dot performed, plus equals I equals greater than movement input equals I dot read value vector2. And all that means basically is when we hit WASD on the keyboard or move the joystick up, down, left, or right, we're going to record the movement to that variable up there, a vector2. A vector2 being a direction left or right or up or down. Very straightforward. So this movement input is the variable we just created up here. Okay. Now we're going to say player controls.enable, which is down here. Then we're going to say on disable, player controls.disable. So if the game object that the script is on is disabled, then we're just going to turn off our player controls. Cool. Now let's save that. Let's make this public so we can see it in the inspector when we actually go into our game. Alright, next I'm going to make a floor for the future video so we have something to walk around on when we actually do our movement. So let's right click, 3D object, plane. Excellent. Now I'm going to double click that to zoom in on it. Next I'm going to drag in the game model I have, which you can find in the description of this video. It's called Low Poly Man. I'm just going to drag that into the scene. Then I'm just going to drag that down here into the assets and select original prefab. Next, I'm going to add a component, and we're going to add our input manager script to this player. Okay, now if I hit play and I hit the WASD keys, you will see that depending on what I'm hitting, it will change the value from -1 to 1 on the X and Y. And again, basically, think of your joystick like a 2D axis. So basically, the W key would make your Y axis go to a +1, where the S key would make your Y axis go to -1, okay? And the A key would make your X axis go to -1, and the D key would make your X axis go to +1. You can also hit a combination of these buttons at the same time. For example, hitting W and D would make your X and Y go to +1. Now, if you had a controller, you can actually move the analog stick halfway up to get values like 0.5 or something in between 0 and 1, or something between 0 and -1. And basically what we can do from that, because you're thinking to yourself, well, this is just numbers, is we can make our player move by a certain speed based on the numbers we're getting from the joystick or WASD keys. And we can also make it move in a certain direction. So you can see how this will actually add on to the future concepts we'll do in this series. In our next video, we're actually going to make our player move in a certain direction and at a certain speed based on the inputs we're taking here, based on the values we're taking from these inputs. So I hope this video cleared some things up for you guys. And if it did help you, drop a like, because it genuinely does help get my series around. If you're feeling like a total champion, leave me a comment below. It does help appease the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're feeling super generous, check out my Patreon below. Until then, I will see you guys in the next one. And from me to you, Happy New Year.